All right, you two, I want to end the foam rolling debate for good today. I'm exhausted talking about it. It disappeared for a long time. Seems it's creeped its way back in a little bit lately.
Like trends do.
Yeah, like trends do. And honestly, if I'm being transparent about it, I was on the foam rolling game big time when it first arrived. It made good like what's the term? Conventional wisdom. It made good sense to me, right? I understood some of the benefits of trigger point therapy. I understood the benefits of massage. I understood the concepts with regard to, soft tissue, remodeling tissues, and how all those things can be beneficial to an athlete or beneficial to basically an average person who's trying to increase their performance, right? Their strength, their endurance, and all those things. So I was on that train for a little while. And I think a lot of people were, and all of the major sort of certifying bodies and educational bodies out there put a lot of time into putting it out there. And at the time I was like, oh, this is good. This is good stuff because it benefits people. But then I think over time, what I realized, and I'm just going to put it out there right at the beginning of this, that what it was a fucking money grab. Wow. And a lot of information was put out before good science or research was kind of put into it. And now I think we have enough. We certainly have enough to basically understand what the benefits can be versus what we were told they could be, or what the general public was told they can be, and where foam rolling really fits into the bigger picture as it relates to general health and wellness as well as performance. So that's why I want to talk about it one more time, and I want to fucking talk about it again. And this comes off the back end of a podcast that we did before, which was on mobility training, because if we go to the kind of the roots of foam rolling, the whole, I think, concept behind this foam rolling thing was, first off, let's break down some of let's start here. Let's break down some of the myths that ran wildly out of control right from the get-go. I'll start, you guys finish up. So the first thing is that we were going to be breaking up muscular adhesions and adhesions within our musculature. We weren't even talking about fascia at the time when this stuff first came out. We're going to be breaking up these knots that are in the muscular system, right? And when you break up those knots, that's going to give you more accessibility to the muscles, the muscle that you have. And so you're going to be able to activate more of that, thereby giving you better performance through your workouts and getting better results and shit. Well, we know that couldn't be any further from the truth. We are not remodeling tissue with foam rollers. Why? Because it takes way more pressure to actually remodel, or let's just say, what's the term I'm looking for here?
Realign collagen.
Yeah, realign collagen, but also basically, I want to just, maybe this is not the right term, but I'm going to say it like distort tissue structure to where it changes its alignment or cellular structure. To apply that much pressure to the body would do so much damage to the tissues around it, like you would literally be debilitated. So we're not doing any of that. But the whole theory is that we have these knots, or we have these adhesions, which are like maybe what we've discovered is really what this is what you can think about it is like this layering down like of like a matrix or a web, like a waffling, like you think like fiberglass as you make like maybe a surfboard, right? Or a hard skinned stand-up paddleboard. You have your foam core, and then they lay down this fiberglass, which is like a honeycomb type shape. So, and then over that you put the resin or whatever you're going to do. So it hardens and whatnot. So if you look at the muscular and fascial system, the theory is that we had this, we have this webbing that's getting laid down over these injured areas or areas of trauma. And that by getting on the foam roll, we could then roll across these areas, and we would break up this waffling or this honeycomb and align it more into the alignment of the fibers. As there's
sounds so dumb now that you like explain it like that, right?
But at the time, man, it made perfect sense. Like, oh fuck, this is great. Like we're breaking this stuff down.
Yeah, so tight.
And I think part of the thing that really hooked me into it, and maybe other people, is like we did get an immediate result from some things, which we can talk about. But there was like this immediate feedback loop that was that was created. And you're like, oh, this must be working because when I do this, I have less pain. And then I can get into deeper ranges of motions or fuller range of motions. I feel warmed up. I feel like I've broken up the restrictions from a structural component when really what we're more doing is we're overriding some neurological stuff, which we can talk about. So that was the one myth that got me kind of right up front, but there's some other ones.
I mean, you get off it and you feel good. You want it must be something, right? Because our feelings are just very important.
Yeah, I know. Emotions.
That was a joke, but sorry, it was really dry. Yeah, no, like you're talking about, you get on the foam roller and, my hamstrings are tight. I get on and I roll on my hamstring and I get up and I feel less pain. I have a little bit of increased mobility or flexibility, right? That being said, what are you going to use? What are you going to do with that movement, with the
extra range or mobility or flexibility?
Am I just sitting on this and thinking like, hey, my ass is tight, so I'm like rolling, I'm looking into the ceiling and I get off and that's just, it did what it did. It remodeled all the tissue. That's not even close to what's going on, right? I'm kind of laying on something. I might be tight. It gives me a higher pain threshold. I get off of it. Now there's a lower pain threshold. I've kind of just sat and mushed into it. We have a down regulation. And now I'm just going into my squat without maybe doing the things that we talked about in the other podcast, the mobility of actually activating, not annihilating, and getting into the movement pattern that we need to help us basically not be tight and need to be sitting on this foam roller.
Yeah. So there's I like where you're going there because I think it's a little bit of what what hooked me was, wow, that felt good. This feels good. Mm-hmm. Like I walked in, I was tight. I spent 20 minutes on the foam roller and I feel less tight. And now I feel like I'm moving better. And just the emotional connection to that component maybe impacted my workout. Like, oh, I'm benefiting by this. So now I'm performing at a higher level. And to that extent, there could have been some performance increases or gains then. And I think that's where some of the confusion comes in. But I am performing better and I am doing it. So giving it up after feeling that connection to it, maybe emotionally or otherwise, it was probably hard for me to do. I think there's some truth in that, dude. Like, yeah, I think I'm on. I think maybe I didn't realize that before, but you might be right about that. But yeah, so the again, that connection component, but also that, well, this feels great, so I should do it. If it feels good, I should do it. I can't argue with that. If I'm going to be honest, hey, if it helps you feel better, if it helps prepare you a little bit more for the workout session that you're going to do because you have an emotional connection to this, much like a lot of other exercises. If you think your workout's shit because you didn't train your abs for 20 minutes at the end of your workout, well then fucking train your abs for 20 minutes at the end of the workout. Fine. Whatever makes you happy. I mean, you do you, it's America, and this should be about you and what you're trying to get out of it. But at the same time, I don't know how much real benefit there is to that, but if it benefits you psychologically and emotionally, then I can't argue with that. It's going to be hard for me to argue that.
I was going to say, I'm sure there's some science that supports the psychosomatic as far as hey, if it makes you feel good and this is how you're feeling, then you're going to perform that much better.
Yeah, I love that you just brought up the science because with regard to the remodeling tissue, science proves that is just not the case.
With the foam roller, yeah.
Yeah, with the foam roller. But there's other science out there that I don't know, there's a lot of theory about some other things that science has since disproved. Maybe you have an example.
Right now, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things things that I remember was that it increased your core temperature. It helped increase your core temperature.
Yeah. So one of the things was, which we talked about before, is that foam rolling helps to move the lactic acid out of your muscles. God,
I love that one.
So that was one, but I can actually, expand upon that. I remember there was a massage therapist that was telling somebody that the foam roller helps to break up the pockets of lactic acid in your musles.
Not just inside the cell?
Yeah. Not just move it out of the muscles, but break up the pockets of lactic acid. And I was
I remember
what?
Where the hell was that? Was that here?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
I can't name names, but yes. It wasn't affiliated with Red Dot Fitness at all.
Yeah. I remember who that was. Yeah. I remember us looking at one another when that came out of that person's mouth at the same time with the biggest eyes ever and trying not to laugh out loud. Breaking up lactic acid. No such fucking thing.
Nope.
I think we can move on from that, but first off, you need to understand what lactic acid is and what lactate is and what's happening there in terms of the recovery process, both intra and post workout, before you start making claims like that. But that was one that I heard too. Like, hey, it helps move the lactic acid out from the previous day or whatever's workout, so that you are ready to do your stuff. I mean, it sounds ridiculous because it is. That makes no sense. I remember being told that it increases temperature, tissue temperature, right? And prepares it for movement, so that you are effectively warming up.
I mean, I've sweated on a foam roller before, rolling back and forth, but like, I mean,
so there's like this misplaced like energy with this whole thing, and that ironically, it's the energy system pathways that are happening there. So what's happening? I mean, we're stimulating the nervous system. We'll get to this, what's actually happening when you're on a foam roller, but it's stimulating this pathway, which is maybe increasing circulation, right? And we're getting a response. We're starting to sweat a little bit. The body's starting to prime and prep and get ready for whatever activity that it's now being conditioned to do. But the science has now proven that there is no temperature change. I mean, no significant temperature change within the tissue. You are not
because of foam rolling.
Because of foam rolling, you are not you're not heating up tissue and prepping it for movement. You're just not prepping the actual tissue quality itself for any kind of movement using a foam. We're not. Yeah. So talk about that.
So your fascia, literally is allowing or restricting for sliding and gliding movement over structures. For instance, have you ever had your hip flexor pop when you're laying supine and you go and extend your leg down out of flexion? It pops, right? Usually that's a tight hip flexor going over the ASIS of the pelvis, right?
This tight tissue.
Yeah. And it's not allowing it to expand anymore, and boom, it gets stuck, and then it is not sliding like it should be over the ASIS, and it goes cuckoo.
It's like a rough slide.
Exactly. Right. And you actually feel like this popping, kind of like, oh, my hip's popping. You know? That is what the fascia is now. Like, let's say they're weak. That fascia is tightened to now restrict movement because they don't own it. Right. And so we start getting back into the conversation of mobility and kind of owning your ranges and why the tissue would be tight and or not.
Yeah. So we're not, it's not sliding and gliding is what you're saying.
Exactly.
So you're not using the foam roller to increase that sliding and gliding.
Exactly.
It just simply isn't happening. So again, you got muscle fibers, right? They're in bundles, right? Those are within bundles, within other bundles, right? And then on top of that, to cover that, there's this, we've talked about this at length on other podcasts. There's this fascia, or for lack of a better term, like a saran wrap that connects all of it together. And there needs to be a fluid motion underneath that. The collagen that I was mentioning earlier with regard to some of the microtraumas that might happen is in between there. It's like it happens in between that fascial system, and sometimes within the fascial system and within the in those muscular bundles. Yeah, the fiber bundles. And for lack of a better term, that kind of looks like, if you've ever been to like you've seen any cadaver anatomy, and actually Myers.
I like the chicken leg. Like, when you get a chicken leg and the way it looks. Oh, sorry. Never mind.
What? Wait. The chicken leg.
Dude, like, she's talking about the chicken with the thigh on it, dude, with the skin on it.
Okay, yeah. Gotcha.
Sorry.
Gotcha. So you pull the skin back, and then there's this other very thin, like white sheath that's between the skin and the muscle. That's what you're talking about?
And then in the chicken leg, you can see how they're all bundled together.
Gotcha. Like,
and then
so
the
if you
tendon
cut
structure and stuff. Yeah.
So if you cut a chicken leg, that's another way. I would have just gone with like the spaghetti analogy, like the dry spaghetti analogy, where you look at that and you see all those little. And you look at it sideways, cross section, you have all those little bundles. If you had a piece of saran wrap to cover that, and then now what you have is that assume that's like your bicep, that all slides and glides. Well, you get this collagen buildup where there's traumas or there's a lack of mobility or sliding and gliding. And that kind of looks like Myers from, what's it called? Is it fascial chains? What's it called? Anatomy trains. Yeah, there's some great shit in that book, and
so good. And
on YouTube, just of what that actually looks like. It's kind of like spider web within the tissues, and for some people that's a lot, but it's restrictive, right? And so when we got on foam rollers, we thought like, hey, we're going to break this down. It's going to give us it's going to give us less restricted movement. And again, create this fluid movement. Hydrate the muscles was another thing that I heard, that pushes fluid around and it hydrates the muscles. Sorry. Just so much stuff. And there's a few people out there that are still really pushing the foam roll, or including the foam roll in their protocols. Some pretty I'm just going to say well-known high-level strength coaches, organizations that are putting it out there. Now, that's kind of like the bullshit that we've heard about or that exists with regard to foam rolling. I want to give credit one more time to, if it makes you feel better to foam roll, by all means, knock yourself out, foam roll. There could be some benefit to, there could be one benefit that kind of comes to mind for me. And I know we've sort of discussed this offline with regard to how to use a foam roll if you are trying to enhance performance and specifically with regard to mobility and strength. And that is the fact that when we have this outside stimulus, and we talked about this at length in the mobility podcast, there is the sensory component that we can apply to the body, which can downregulate certain pain mechanisms or that sensitivity. So, Jeff, you were giving me an example. I believe it was the hamstrings. Is that what it was?
For the foam roller?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just any body part, but most of the time for me it was my hamstrings. I had a tight hamstring. And so in doing that, I would just foam roll before I deadlifted, and I would get off and I would have it would only be on days where I was extremely sore and I would have just less perceived pain. And over time, I attributed that just because I'm just literally laying on these receptors. They're getting loud and then I'm coming off and it feels like less of a result. I stopped foam rolling completely and I have better mobility than I ever have in my entire life. And the time when I was foam rolling, I was in a lot of pain. It was the only mobility I was doing. Let's just throw that out there because I thought that was
what you're supposed to do. Yeah.
Right. Until I was educated and I kind of learned more about what we're talking about now, what the foam roller is doing, and then kind of moving back to true mobility. And just seeing wow, I was wasting a lot of time rolling up and down. And like you're saying, for the pain piece or the performance piece, I think there is a very small sliver of benefit, of use, but it's so minute, and you really have to know how to do it and be applying it. And I don't think most people are going to understand how to do that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's so in terms of this whole debate, is it really worth your time? And that's relative, right? Again, if it's a psychological and emotional component, I can't really fucking argue with that. Your feelings are, as you stated so eloquently, Jeff, they're extremely important.
Mm-hmm,
very important to me, specifically when it comes to foam rolling. But that said, if that's what you need to do in order to mentally and emotionally prep yourself for your day, then go right ahead. Obviously, if you're on a team and the strength coach insists that you do it before you work out or whatever your coach is saying, you have to do it, well, then maybe that is a prerequisite to getting the workout done for the day. You got to do it. That small sliver, though, you mentioned, how can that be beneficial? So again, without rehashing everything we've already talked about in previous podcasts, just touching on, there is a sensory component to, let me back up. When we're on the foam roll and we feel those tight spots, those was referred to as hot spots or adhesions. And I think everybody can kind of relate to this as they've rolled through from the ankle complex up to the back of the knee, think through Achilles, up through gastroc and soleus. I don't care who you are, you're going to find a hot spot or two. So what's really going on there? So you've got some pain receptors that are located all over the body, different sense. And there's different types of receptors that happen at the joint, mechanoreceptors, pain receptors, otherwise known as nociceptors. There's all kinds of things that give feedback to the brain that then send signals back to you where they need to go in order for you to respond appropriately. When you apply a certain amount of pressure to these receptors, right, these pain receptors, but you're doing it at a lower level, like a lower signal, effectively what it can do is two things will happen. One, it can override, right, that signal to want to contract or be tight and not allow you that range. So if I go into let's say a stretch, or I go into a movement where I get down and it's beyond where my body can reasonably control, I don't have mobility there is the term, then I may start to feel some pain because of those receptors are starting to send signals going, this is not good, right? If you go any further, you could potentially get hurt. It's effectively like a safety mechanism, right? But by placing a slight amount of stimulus on there, like a foam roller, right, on your calf complex or whatnot, putting that pressure on there sends that signal to the brain, and it does it in a minimal level to where your brain starts to recognize, oh, this is not dangerous, right? It starts to downregulate, or it starts to decrease the strength of the signal going back. So effectively what that does is now you're feeling a little less pain. Now, for a lot of people, again, going back to the sliver of benefit, that can be, if you're a weenie, like, and you just can't handle any kind of pain, then doing a little bit of foam rolling in order to maybe minimize that pain at the beginning so that you can start pushing and to derive the benefits of the workout that you're going to be doing, well, then maybe there's benefit there. But outside of that, I can't think of much. I don't know, maybe you guys agree or disagree.
I was going to say, so
CeCe likes to crack her back on it.
Yeah,
I do.
It's old
I do my upper thoracic.
That's all that's for.
I like to work on my shoulder joint mobility by laying on it vertically and, doing my angels and stuff like that. I actually never used the foam roller pre-workout or anything. I always laid on it and rolled on it after a workout. And I think, I was just lazy to do it before a workout. Like, I'm like, let's get in, let's get busy. I don't want to lay on the floor. So using the foam roller, I applied it more after a workout. And again, I think it was just, I don't know if it's desensitizing my body. If I was feeling sore or whatnot, just sitting on it, rolling on it and whatnot, and then getting up and feeling better. I think it was just the fact of, desensitizing, is that the right word? Or sensitizing my body?
It's down-regulating. It's down-regulating.
I don't know if it's down-regulating or just that because I was feeling sore and then applying the foam roller and then getting up.
You felt less sore.
I felt less sore. Right. So I don't know if it was like a CNS down-regulation. I think it was more of just like a
Okay,
mental.
so we're back to feelings.
I wasn't going to say feelings.
You didn't want to say it.
We're back to feelings.
Yeah. So, but where was I going? So, as far as like with the foam roller, I mean, you and I, we went to an NSCA conference and there was a whole seminar on foam rolling, but debunking the use of the foam roller and how research studies have shown time and time again that there might be a very minuscule benefit of using a foam roller with like an active dynamic warm up. But as far as increasing flexibility and mobility, no. And, I think that as far as the foam roller goes, the other thing with it is that there is no set protocol as far as how you're supposed to use it, how long you're supposed to use it, what's the method of application. So there's all these research studies that have been out there, but they don't have a general consensus as far as this is the scientific benefit. There's anecdotal, I think, benefit. And while some of the studies might show that there is some statistical benefit, it's probably less than 5% when you're talking about like increasing flexibility. And then again, for how long is that? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, part of that probably is because anybody that's going to put any money into any research that better have doing a research study that shows the benefits. They're doing it for a reason. And as for some economic benefit on the back end where they're going to sell their own brand of foam rollers. And what we've already articulated and what you can go find out for yourself in is just do some research. And there isn't any research that really supports any of what I just said. So if they're not going to make money on the back end from doing this research and then producing and publishing this research, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to do it. And that's, I think, a very strong indication that we're probably, I know we're right about this. Like it is what it is. That might hurt people's feelings, but at the end, people can still debate it because, again, what are the benefits? I'm not going to say there are zero benefits. I'm just going to Jeff's point, like, are the benefits worth the time that we see putting people in or putting people are putting into this? And how do we really know? Right. Because of what you just said, CeCe, there really isn't a lot of research or science or let's just say beneficial long-term studies that show that there's any changing here. We definitely know we're not changing tissue, right? We definitely know that. We definitely know we are not from the foam roll getting any increases in flexibility, mobility, or strength. The argument could be made, though, that if I can down and regulate my system, and this goes back to our mobility podcast, if I can down regulate my system, which then allows me pain-free to get to a range that I don't own yet, right? I was feeling this pain we used the squat before, we'll use it again. I get into the squat, I get to parallel, I feel pain. I'm starting to feel tight, like either through my hips, my glutes, my low back, whatever. And that's now limited me. That pain signal then comes back to the brain. That prevents me from them going down into a deeper squat. And I'm trying to access that range. Then I re-rack the bar. I get now down on the foam roll. I spend a couple of minutes rolling maybe my hip complex, maybe my low back. Now I get back under that bar under a lower load. And all of a sudden, boom, I'm down into the bottom, ass to grass. No butt winking's happening right now. So I don't have any like postural or movement or mechanic deviations. Now I have this new range. Okay. So now I've accessed a range that I didn't have 5 minutes ago. What I do from there is really important. And that is training that range, that new range that I found momentarily, right? And strengthen through that range so that I can improve my performance, my results, my hypertrophy, whatever it is, my ultimate goal is. It should all be goal dependent, but that is, if there's a benefit to this down regulation that we know that happens, and the psychological and emotional benefit, that's the one way I could see doing it, or I could see applying it or getting behind, if that helps my client. But to your point, Jeff, you don't have to have a foam roller to do that. And you could be spending your time doing way more beneficial work to finding that range, breaking through those barriers of limitation with regard to mobility, strength, and or pain, as a result of the previous two, on the floor, and while building strength before you ever get into your squat in that example. And we covered that kind of ad nauseum in other podcasts, but I could probably get behind that. But at the same time, like, is that really where I want my clients spending their time?
So real quick too, like with the whole like pushing of the lactic acid pocket, like I was just thinking in my head, like,
oh, we're going back to
so
this?
Hold on a second. Like,
I love this. Let's go back.
So like, let's say we're rolling, right? Is there like a certain pressure that I have to push for my testosterone to like push out the pocket, or like the estrogen?
That's
or
the
like
next product, man, the testosterone roll.
So is that the PVC? Is that this certain type of plastic?
You got to really turn it up, man. I mean, yeah, you really got to go to the 1.5 inch PVC or ABS. It's that's because the smaller diameter.
You got to get right in that hole.
You get right into there.
Okay, I just wanted to know because that's.
Right. If you're wearing Crocs while doing it,
you're doing it right.
That gives you a plus 10% boost.
Dude, I love it.
Yeah.
The worst things for your feet. Oh wait, I shouldn't say that.
So coming back, in all seriousness, again, there could be some benefit to it. We've already kind of articulated those things: psychological, emotional benefit, but also that down regulation of that pain threshold during that time. But your body, that said, your body is going to adapt to that over time. So what we do know also through the science is that at the beginning, right, you can have way more benefit that it's going to have down the line because your body will adapt. Like ultimately, if you do this regularly, let's go back to the calf complex example. Over time, you're going to start to down regulate. Right. And your body becomes desensitized to that. So it's going to recognize, oh, this is okay. This is an okay type of pain. It's not putting me in danger. And it starts to lessen the signal that's being sent. So 2 weeks from the time you started, the pain that you felt now versus the pain that you felt then should be much different. If you added load to the roll, like now you have somebody pushing or giving you manual therapy through there, you're going to find a whole new level, right? And that's important to understand. So if you've been foam rolling your calves the same way, you walk into the gym, you pull that foam roller off the wall, that trigger point, roll off the wheel or off the wall or whatever, you lay down on the turf or you get down on the turf and you continue rolling the same way, you're fucking wasting your time unless all you're trying to do is get in touch with yourself.